view from Israel. Mark Regev is back with a senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mark, it's always good having you. I always feel bad under these circumstances. But I did want to pick your brain a little bit about this behind-the-scenes maybe tension between Antony Blinken, our Secretary of State, some of your leaders, over the U.S. recommending go slow on this response in Gaza. What can you tell us?
Well, let's be frank. I think Israel and the United States see eye to eye on a host of important issues. Once again, we both believe that Hamas can no longer stay in power in the Gaza Strip, that they have to be removed from their control. Two, that the reason that the humanitarian pause ended was because Hamas didn't act according to its own commitments to release hostages. Three, that there has to be created a new situation in the Gaza Strip. And four, that in pursuing these goals, we have to make a maximum effort to avoid seeing civilians caught up in the crossfire between the Israeli Defense Forces and the Hamas terrorists. And on all that, we agree.
Maybe so, and I'm maybe reading too much to what were talks of heated discussions, and that some of your colleagues were getting annoyed that the administration was kind of lecturing you on this, and that some of you felt the need to go your own way, even if the United States is saying you're going too far. What happened there? And is there a sense that Israel, even if the United States were to say, go slow or watch this response or push another truce, it would be the first time we've seen Israel do something like that in our long multi-decade relationship?
So I was in those meetings with the Secretary of State, and I can tell you no one was lecturing anyone. We were sharing views on how we think the best way to proceed is. We can have here and there, we see things not identically. That's only natural between friends. Obviously, anything the United States says, we take very, very seriously. And I think they take very seriously whatever we say to them. But we will pursue this campaign against Hamas. Hamas will be destroyed. But in parallel now to the military operation, we will be working with the Americans and others to take steps, first of all, to make sure that humanitarian aid comes in for the civilian population. That's our commitment. That's part of our ethos. That's who we are. We don't want to see unnecessary civilian hardship. And, of course, we will continue to differentiate. We're a democratic country. We work according to the rules of war. We will continue to differentiate between civilians who are not the target of our operation and the brutal Hamas terrorists who are our vicious enemy, and we will destroy them.
So when we got word this morning, Mark, that Israel pulled out of these talks to get another truce possibly going in Qatar, what happened?
So the talks were at an impasse because Hamas had not fulfilled its own commitments. There was an agreed list that Hamas had once again signed off on, and suddenly they couldn't deliver, or they wouldn't deliver. And we don't want to just talk for the sake of talking. Our goal was to get our people out. The truth is, had Hamas continued to release hostages, we would still be in a pause now. We've only returned to combat because Hamas refused to follow through on a list that it itself agreed to. So we're back in combat, and we actually think by beefing up the military pressure on Hamas, by making them pay, by destroying their military machine, by eliminating their senior commanders, we're actually acting to facilitate the expeditious release of our hostages. Because as President Biden himself said, Hamas only understands pressure. And believe me, they understand the military pressure that the Israeli Defense Forces are applying at this moment.
You know, Israel knows a thing or two about pressure as well. You're getting it from all over the world. A lot of people lecturing you on overdoing it in your response to the horrific October 7th attacks. You've accurately and correctly pointed out that the United States did and would do the same again in similar circumstances. 9/11 is a good example. But you seem to be losing, and we mention this a lot, this PR war, that Hamas seems to have gotten the world behind the notion that we want to continue to see a truce and release hostages, and Israel won't let us. So how do you respond to that?
Well, you put your finger, Neil, right on the problem, because Hamas says we want a truce. We want to stop the fighting. And to a lot of people around the world, including in the United States, oh, that sounds logical. Of course, let's end the bloodshed. What's the problem, Neil? That if Hamas remains in power, you'll have me interviewed here on your program in 6 months or in a year, and we'll have another Gaza war. Why? Because Hamas says openly, given the opportunity, they would commit another October 7th massacre. They say they would do it again and again and again. Hamas is not a normal player. They're like Al-Qaeda. They're like ISIS. They are committed to their violent terrorism, their extremism, their jihad. For them, there is no Israel. It should be destroyed. For them, there are no Israelis. They should all be killed. They should all be murdered. That's part of their charter. And so I think it's people need to understand this ceasefire that people are calling for might have good intentions, but it's misguided because it's actually a Band-Aid solution. It just gives you a temporary, timeout for Hamas to regroup and rearm, and then they will attack us again, and we'll be back to square one. We don't agree to that, and we shouldn't agree to that. And the Israeli people, especially those citizens who live in the south of Israel, who've seen Hamas cross the border and butcher their communities, we will not stand for that any longer, and we refuse to live next to this terror enclave on our southern border. And I think anyone in our situation would understand that there is no one should have to live in such a situation with terrorists just across the frontier, threatening to come across the border and kill them. No one should stand for that, and we won't stand for that.
So when there are separately reports that you won't stand for it even after the war, and that Israel will be targeting Hamas leaders all over the world, well, a good many of those leaders are in Qatar, supposedly negotiating for and working on behalf of both sides to hammer out yet another truce. So would those attacks to target Hamas leaders include Qatar?
You know, the United States spent a lot of time and an effort to take out Osama bin Laden. And you got him in the end. And it's good that you got him. And so we look at the same way as the Hamas senior leadership, both their leadership in Gaza and their leadership abroad. Anyone who is responsible for the butcher of our people. And remember that terrible day in October when they murdered over 1,200 Israelis? In proportionate terms, it was like 20 9/11s, yes? If you look at the percentage of our population that was murdered. They took 240 of our citizens and others hostage and took them to Gaza after abducting them. We don't have to stand for this. And anyone involved in commanding that operation will pay a price, and we will reach them. And it doesn't matter where they are, we will reach them.
Okay. No, that's what I rudely interrupted. That you finished it. No matter where they are, right?
We will reach them, and justice will be done.
All right, Mark. Thank you very much. Sorry for that interruption at the end there. Mark Regev, the senior advisor to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Well, again, it is waiting for the return of hostages right now. There are supposedly about 130 or so who are still alive. A family that